Hello there, I'm Ed Butler. Welcome to Business Daily from the BBC. Coming up, the debt pile that's growing ever higher in Asia.
Credit is definitely on the rise in Vietnam. You know, if you're passing by an electronics shop, there are signs advertising phones for 0% interest loans.
Are Vietnamese and Chinese ready to handle the temptations of the consumer age?
The China dream for young people is to get a rich quick dream. If we get into a normal economy and no debt-led growth and everybody needs to work for a living, lots of young people don't believe in that.
That's all to come in Business Daily from the BBC. Is East Asia facing a climbing debt crisis? Yesterday on Business Daily, we heard from a couple of problem debtors in the United States, but maybe it's in Asia where the biggest problems are currently presenting themselves. Here are a couple of numbers for you. Consumer lending in China has trebled in just the last decade. It now totals more than half of the nation's annual income, and it's even higher in neighbouring countries like Malaysia, Thailand and South Korea. The problem here isn't just the levels of indebtedness, but it's the speed of change and the question whether ordinary citizens are able to cope with the problems that so much debt can sometimes lead to. In 2014, I visited Vietnam. There, in a rural community near the Cambodian border, I met Phan Hu Loc, a 37-year-old former policeman who'd become a moneylender. Basing himself at the nearby casinos, he'd cashed in on the vulnerabilities of local gamblers who came there.
Whoever ran out of money, people brought them to me so I could lend to them. Usually it works like this. They ask for $1,000 and we give them $900. $100 is our fee. Some of them pay the money back on the day. Others have to stay in the casino for weeks until they can pay me back.
Locke seems a little edgy as I talked to him. There had already been 2 broken appointments before he finally agreed to meet me. It had taken persuasion from friends, I was told, to get him to speak at all. What did you do when people couldn't pay you back?
We scare them.
How did you do that?
We starve them, we lock them up, sometimes in a room, sometimes in the toilet.
They get pretty scared when you do that, I guess.
The new players are really scared. However, with the old players, they're not scared.
I heard stories that some players who couldn't pay back their debts had their fingers cut off, their ears sometimes. Is that something you did?
Not me, no.
Did you hear those stories? Did some casinos get involved in that kind of thing?
I know one casino doing that. There was a gangster working there called Hai. They cut the finger or the ear and they would send it back to the family. Each casino had their own way. That was his way.
Did anyone ever get killed?
They wouldn't normally go that far. But some players get beaten too hard, so they jump from the top floor of the casino to make it stop. They kill themselves.
The Vietnamese loan shark Phan Hu Loc speaking to me in 2014. The point to be made here isn't just about gambling, of course. It is that even when people do make complaints about the kind of violent tactics he describes, the casinos would pay bribes to the police to make them go away. It seems that any Vietnamese who find themselves in debt are pretty much on their own when they get in too deep. Lien Huang is a journalist in Saigon. I spoke to her about the recent credit boom that she's seen in her country.
Credit is definitely on the rise in Vietnam. You can see a real visible shift in the country from a savings culture to a credit or more consumption-based culture. And this is coming from the government deciding that it wants more people banked, more people conducting digital transactions. And so that's led to a lot more options in the private banking sector.
And how are ordinary people coping with that transition?
It's happening really quickly. So when you go around the streets of Saigon, you can certainly see signs of the change. You know, if you're passing by an electronics shop, there are signs advertising phones for 0% interest loans.
When I was in Vietnam just 3 or 4 years ago, I was struck by those people who were getting into debt problems were really kind of high and dry. I mean, there wasn't any infrastructure support for people, for example, who had problems with gambling or something else that would suck them in. Do you get that feeling that ordinary consumers are perhaps unfamiliar with the kind of risks that they might be facing?
That's certainly an issue. The issue of debt has been around for a long time. I think what's changing is just that it's becoming more digital and more commercialized. So this risk that you've seen in the past was based more on cash. They would put up their houses even to pay off loan sharks. Now people are getting loans more from the bank, but there isn't really an infrastructure to take care of people who get into that vicious cycle of debt. We don't really have a bankruptcy system, for example, for individuals.
Is there any concern on the part of the government about this rising level of consumer debt?
There is concern, but it's not the top priority right now. The main priority from the policymaker side is to get people banked. Something like 70% of the country does not have a bank account. So that's slightly different from borrowing, but it is linked to what the government goal is right now.
Lien Huang in Saigon. Well, that's Vietnam. What about its mighty northern neighbour? China is Asia's largest economy. It has aggregate debt 2.5 times the national GDP. That's record levels, which rival the US figure. Most of the debt has been run up by corporations and local governments, but in recent years, ordinary Chinese have joined in the borrowing splurge, and in a big way. To give you a flavour, I'm going to remind you now of 2 interviews we first played back in 2017. That was when I travelled to China's major cities, Shanghai and Beijing, and I met ordinary people caught in the consumer debt spiral. This was Ali, a student with no income who was already out of his depth in debt.
At
the very beginning, when I was a freshman, I would like to have an iPhone, but my family didn't support me. So I took expensive loan worth $1,200, and I thought I could pay all the loan back. But it turns out that I cannot, because every month I need to pay $30.
Right, that sounds like it's about 15 or 20% a year that you're paying. What's happened to your debt level since?
When you get loan from the first app and I cannot get the money back to that app, I will open up another account for another app to pay the first one's loan. And it's like a big snowball. It becomes bigger and bigger.
How many different loans do you now have?
Until now, I have 6 of them.
And how much debt do you have in total?
20,000.
So about $3,000. Do you have any way to repay that debt?
At
the very beginning, I called my parents. My parents pay half of it. But now I still got plenty of debt. I don't know when can I pay this off.
What are you spending all of this borrowed money on? You've got your iPhone. What are you doing?
刚开始是苹果 iPhone 5S, iPhone 6, iPhone 6.
Every time Apple company release a new product, I really want to get myself a new one. But I don't have money. What should I do?
Do these loan companies not place any conditions on the loans they give you?
就是签一些协议嘛，在网上，在 app 上。
You need to offer your picture and the contact number of your parents and my ID number. In the contract, I saw that if I don't pay the money back, I will be on the blacklist. But nobody knows what is the blacklist is. So if I don't pay the money, they can do nothing to me.
Are you not concerned, though, that something bad really could happen? They could contact the authorities, the police, they could get the courts involved, they could chase you down, they know where you live.
有时候想过，然后我也就是尽量想。
I think the possibility is really tiny because a lot of students here in university, they always get loan from this kind of app. They are doing great. Like one of my friends, he has been in debt for more than 1 year. No one is chasing him down, so I think it's safe.
All of your friends are in debt?
差不多吧。
Mostly.
这里有没有贷款啊？你这边有吗？
Ali may seem upbeat, but is his confidence misplaced? There have been reports of violence against students by some moneylenders on campuses and a spate of debt-related suicides. Also, borrowing is now just so easy that lenders are going to ever greater lengths to ensure that their debts are repaid. Listen to this remarkable exchange. We asked our fixer to ring, at random, a Shanghai lender. She was posing as a student. She wanted a loan of just $500.
We might not be able to do that at such short notice, but other places offer those naked loans.
好呀，
I see.
那个
What's the interest rate for that?
I can help you find out, but you must provide your ID card details and the address of your parents' home. A naked loan means that you take photographs, and if you can't repay the loan on time, these will be sent to your parents' home.
什么样的照片呢？
What kind of photographs?
Naked photos.
裸到什么
How naked? To what extent?
Naked photos, no clothes on.
什么都不
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. A so-called naked lender caught there on the phone by our local producer in China. The naked bit is, of course, necessary to force students to repay their debts, a sign, you might say, of the lender's weakness, their inability to use more conventional means to force repayment. The Shanghai-based economist Andy Shear says the big problem here is just how rapidly personal debts like these have been accumulating in China's economy.
5 or 6 years ago, it was almost nothing. Then it's been growing very, very rapidly. Compared to household disposable income, that is over 100%, so it's not low by global standards.
So you mean people are more indebted than they earn per year?
That's correct. When it slows down, you get a double whammy. The household sector is under a lot of repayment pressure. We see in consumption downgrading, people trying to economize. So any pricey stuff is in trouble. Local governments have revenue pressure, so the infrastructure spending is also in trouble. So you reach a turning point.
Yeah.
The people cannot continue the pace of borrowing anymore. Then you get the bad effects of too much debt. So that's where we are now.
So when the local government stops spending on infrastructure, that presumably means there'll be local workers who are not getting jobs because there's less infrastructure being built.
Oh, no, the central government is always very worried about employment. I'm not so much. For blue-collar jobs, actually, it's not so easy to find people. What China has is a white-collar surplus. The colleges are graduating 7 million each year, and the economy is slowing. There's no need for so many college graduates. So college graduates' salary is being under pressure.
I met a student in Beijing and he'd got into huge debt. He was just borrowing money from local moneylenders to buy gadgets and computer products. He kind of thought that he could get away with it because he didn't think that the moneylenders would ever be able to hurt him in the long run. I mean, is there a kind of lack of sophistication even on the part of money lending services?
Well, you're talking about P2P platforms. Those guys being basically attracting funds by promising high interest rate. Then they try to find people who will borrow at an even higher interest rate. So we have this group of young people being borrowing this money to buy gadgets, like girls borrowing money to buy bags. They think they can get away with it by shifting the debt from one platform to another. At one point, there were so many P2P startups chasing after customers. So they could just shift the debt around. And there are a lot of horror stories. A lot of P2Ps have gone bust. And also, there are some lenders who chase after your parents because they do not expect young people to honor your debt because you got no income. So they always expect that in Chinese culture, the parents would cough up. Sometimes they sell their property to pay the debt off. So the issue is that it's been growing so rapidly, a lot of bad decisions were made on both sides, both the borrowers and the lenders.
So it's such a new thing, there's just naivety on all sides about this new industry.
Yes, I think that some young people couldn't resist the temptation, and they grew up as a single child. They don't have fear of not having money. So that's, I think, a generational issue. It's a millennial phenomenon.
Do you have faith in the oversight of these industries?
No, there's no oversight in this industry at all. When it started, the government branded it as a technology business. young people chasing their dreams. So I think the Chinese government, in a way, don't mind such bubbles. They think that the money is still in China, and it's no big deal. When push comes to shove, the government can always go after somebody and take the money back and give it back to somebody else. And
is the government wrong to think like that, though?
Well, at macro level, you say, I don't need to worry about stability because China has got a bigger cage. Anything that it wants to escape, then I want to stop you. As long as it's in the cage, I can manage it. So that's why China hasn't had these big blow-ups like in other countries. But there are a lot of inefficiencies associated with that.
What's the worst-case scenario?
The China dream for young people is to get a rich quick dream. I think the government is worried about the young people losing this dream. If we get into a normal economy, no bubbles, and everybody needs to work for a living, lots of young people don't believe in that. Now, if we have real economic reforms and no debt-led growth, then how you persuade young people to adjust to this new reality? It's going to be dicey because this China's system is based on this dream of getting rich quick. And so I don't think that the government wants to give it up. They always want to try something else to revive this dream.
Andy Sher, but while the Chinese dream remains on government life support, what does the rapid build-up of debt in China and the rest of East Asia mean for everyone else? Andy Sher reckons we should all be concerned.
Because of this debt problem, we're not going to see consumption-led growth in East Asia for the foreseeable future. So this region is still export-driven. So if the United States cools off, the global economy is in deep trouble.
When there is a crash, what will it look like? I mean, how will it go pop?
In China, it's all the banking system. Then you're going to have lending growth coming down. The economy is not doing well. That is sort of like Japan after 1992. No explosion.
It's like stagnation.
It's just you stagnate for a long time to absorb the losses.
A somber thought there from economist Andy Sher. Well, that's it for this edition of Business Daily. We will be looking further at this subject, the experience of debt in other parts of the world, later this month. For now, though, from me, have a great weekend.